Has anybody heard this story? Chelsea Clinton, who's the 35-year-old daughter of Bill and Hillary Clinton, supposedly, Chelsea Clinton is telling crowds that she has been pro-choice since she was 6 years old. I don't know how she knew what any of this was about at six, but perhaps in liberal households they start with sex education very, very young. I brought over a couple of women here, and I'm going to show you how it works. Your mom not coming home until a little bit later in the day, so don't tell her what you saw. 907, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 26 right now. This is a story from the Daily Caller. I read this morning, and it made me wonder who put these words into this young woman's mouth. It says, Chelsea Clinton claims she left a pro-life Baptist church when she was 6 years old because they taught her about abortion. Now, her father comes from a Southern Baptist background, not very, like Jimmy Carter, really doesn't adhere to it too strongly. Her mother, though, comes from a United Methodist background. The 35-year-old daughter reportedly said she was tired of critics questioning her family's religion during a recent fundraiser for Hillary Clinton. In other words, at 6 years old, people were telling her, your mom and dad are killing babies. So she left the church. Then she went on to say, I was raised in a Methodist church, and I left the Baptist church before my dad did because I didn't know why they were talking to me about abortion when I was 6 in a Sunday school. That's a true story, she went on to say. So apparently her dad did leave the church. That wouldn't be a surprise now, would it, considering many of that man's actions? And then we talk a little bit about what's going on in her mother's situation, where she got slammed the other day in a primary in New Hampshire. Did you know, though, she's got just as many delegates as Bernie Sanders? Because the Democrat Party, which isn't very democratic apparently at all, has super delegates. See, there's a concern that the average Democrat out there, when they go around saying, oh, you working union people and you poor black people and you poor Latin people, we're here to help you. On the other hand, if you pick a candidate we don't like, we wealthy limousine liberals who run the party are going to overrule you. So Hillary Clinton has a number of these superdelegates coming out of New Hampshire. So even though she got smoked in the primary, she's walking away with just as many delegates as Bernie Sanders. Well, yeah, that doesn't seem fair. Why bother with a primary then in the first place? Well, it's good for show, I suppose. That's what it really comes down to. She's now going around claiming, of course, that the criticism of her email server, the one where, of course, she kept state secrets, which were likely plundered by the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians, that her private server is no big deal, and that any criticism of that is just part of the vast right-wing conspiracy. Hillary Clinton, if you didn't know this, got her start in Washington on the Watergate Committee way back in the 1970s. Carl Bernstein is one of the two reporters from the Washington Post who helped break that story. He helped break that story. Now, you have a lot of liberal people in media. Number one, Bob Woodward, who was his partner on that story. Woodward comes from a very old Republican family in Indiana and was a naval officer before getting into journalism. And he's often criticized by the American left because he tends to be very fair when he talks about these issues. Carl Bernstein grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, best friend, in fact, growing up of Ben Stein. Ben Stein, who went on to work for President Nixon as a speechwriter in the White House, and has remained a conservative stalwart all of these years. So you could say that these two, even though they were working for Pravda on the Potomac back in the 1970s and uncovering the scandal, that they are not media liberals. He was appearing on the Clinton News Network, that's CNN, and he said Hillary cannot keep blaming the GOP for her own mistakes.
I think she has to acknowledge she's made some terrible misjudgments and errors, particularly on the server. Look, the vast right-wing conspiracy didn't put the server in her damn closet. And she's going to have to get by this thing, and she's going to have to acknowledge a terrible misjudgment, it seems to me, here.
Calling it a misjudgment. Now, wouldn't you potentially call it treasonous? And if you knew the law and you knew the rules and then you violated them and then you allowed top secret information to get disseminated to our enemies, wouldn't that be considered a treasonous act versus a misjudgment? I think he doesn't go far enough there. But I would bet most people, even a lot of people on the American left who are trying to paper this one over and say there's nothing to see here, would have a difficult time just calling it a misjudgment. If she's incredibly smart, like they keep telling us, then she wouldn't have such a misjudgment. She'd know better. And to sit there and claim, I didn't know, well, then you're not competent enough to be president of the United States. If that's what your judgment is all about, if it's that poor, then you shouldn't be the person who has charge of that nuclear football. It's 9:12. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And, of course, you can reach our program by dialing 736-0300, 736-0300. And you can always email me, too, at bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. Yesterday, her opponent for that Democrat Party nomination, Bernie Sanders, had lunch with Al Sharpton. Sanders is trying to win some of the votes from the minority community, and for some reason they feel Sharpton is going to be the guy who will actually deliver. We have a caller with us. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. You know, this Hillary thing and everything else, you know our country has gone crazy when a socialist is ahead of the game. An absolute liar we're being told would win against anybody, and a crony capitalist are all leading the playing field. You know, Hillary is something else. You just said that she said she didn't do anything wrong, but yet she's the one that sent out a letter at the beginning of her tenure telling everybody that this couldn't be done, but yet she did it.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and the whole 9 yards. Every time she opens her mouth, she's worse than a used car salesman. She just lies. And people just absolutely love her. I don't get it. Everybody up there that's ahead of the game is a liar. I mean, all they do is lie. Everything they talk about is a lie. Bernie Sanders at least is honest about what he's looking for. He's admitting he's going to tax us to death. But at least he's honest about it.
Right.
You know, everybody else is lying, and Hillary is the worst of the bunch. And we want her in office? You got to be kidding me.
Thank you much for the telephone call. Very well said. 9:14. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. There are photographs released of the meeting between Sharpton and Sanders yesterday. Now, Al Sharpton is a guy who is really, let's be honest, he's a political opportunist. And, you know, he has dead bodies behind him. Some of his rhetoric, we hear talk radio all the time is accused of inciting people to violence, yet there's absolutely no evidence of it anywhere across the United States. On the other hand, Sharpton goes out, shoots off his mouth about the Howard Beach situation in New York, and a couple of people end up dead. In fact, there was a fire that was set after one of his speeches that left 9 people dead at a clothing store in was it Harlem, I believe, about 25 years ago. Sharpton doesn't look pleased to be actually lunching with Sanders. Don't know why he bothered to do it. But Donald Trump was asked about this last night on the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News Channel, and this was Trump's response.
I know Al Sharpton better than I know you, and I've dealt with him for years and years and years, and you know, when he's not political, he says, oh, I love Donald Trump, I love Donald Trump. But I will say, in fact, he came up to my office not so long ago to apologize because on his show, which is now off the air, which is a fortunate thing, he called me a racist. And he literally came up to my office and he apologized to me, which, by the way, I thought was very nice. So I know Al, you know, Al is just doing his thing, Bill. He does his thing. We all do our thing. He was doing his thing, and he continues to do it.
Trump actually is onto something here, and I'll confirm it. Bernie Sanders and I have but 2 things in common. Number one, we were both people from New York State. He was from the city. I was from the other end of the state. We were transplants and lived in Vermont. I did for a while. He's still there. Number 2, we both had lunch with Al Sharpton. I don't know if I've ever brought this up before, but in 1991, I met Sharpton at a rally, and I interviewed him. And when I finished, it was an unusual day. I didn't have to run off to some other assignment. And Sharpton said, hey, I'm going to pop into a place called Vera's Cafe. He said, I'm going to pop in and get some chicken wings for lunch. He said, come along. So I went and I sat with him. When there's not a microphone or a camera in front of Al Sharpton, he's funny, he's nice, he tells great jokes. And then a few years later, I was working with a guy by the name of Greg Kelly. Greg Kelly is now he's the anchor at Fox 5 in New York mornings. used to be the weekend anchor at Fox and Friends at the national level, but I gave Greg his first job coming out of the Marine Corps. Now, if you don't know who he is, Greg's dad, Ray, was commissioner of police in New York not once but twice. And when I told Greg the Sharpton story, Greg says, yeah, you know what? My dad says exactly the same thing about him. So it's all for show. It's all about enriching the Reverend Al. And the Reverend Al met yesterday with Bernie Sanders because, well, he's just making sure he's covering all of his bases. 9:17, you're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Yeah, Bill, this is Stephen calling back again. You had a comment about an email that you received, and my understanding is that the untold story is yellow cake.
Oh, I've heard about that. Yeah.
For the Malheur area.
Yeah.
So that you can pass that on to her. That's everything.
The Paiute
I've
Nation
heard is that
the Paiute Nation made all sorts of noise about these guys being there. Yet it's going to profit from all of this. That's the real reason the liberals in charge of that tribe want these guys out of there.
Well, I think it's the same thing with all this federal land in the West, is that there's lots of resources there that the federal government wants control of so that Hillary can sell it.
To the Chinese. Hey,
I got one other request for you. I know there's people that are on the fence between Trump and Cruz. Maybe you could do a little dialogue or monologue or whatever about the differences between those two for those people who are on the fence.
I'm one of them. And thank you for the call. I'm one of them. Ted Cruz is probably a lot closer to me when it comes to my personal beliefs. On the other hand, and Jindal and Paul really were my guys. Then they were out. Perry would have been my guy. He's out. But Cruz, my only drawback about Cruz is, even though the court in Illinois said that he is a citizen and he's eligible to run, it still makes me slightly uncomfortable about electing a guy president who lived for his first 4 years of his life in Alberta. And Alberta's a lot like here, but it's not like the rest of the United States in a lot of ways. And so that's going to be a difficult thing for him to overcome. And I don't think that's an issue that's going to go away, because you bet the Democrats would bring it up because they're still angry. We talked about Mr. Obama being born in Kenya or Indonesia or perhaps Mars. So that's going to come along. And then there's Trump. I read a great comment. There's a young man who listens to the program. He works at a local brewery here in town. And he sent a comment, or made a comment on my Facebook page yesterday about a lot of things Trump says certainly seem to resonate, but you just don't know. I mean, because of Trump's show business past and the bravado, you don't know what to trust. So we've got to make a call, most of us, down the road here. I think it's all going to become academic, though. If Trump wins in South Carolina, he's going to win in Alabama because Jeff Sessions is behind him there. And that means that's a big chunk of that Southern strategy that Cruz has. And if you're a Republican, then you're going to have to just go along with whatever that choice happens to be. But I'm starting to feel at least more comfortable with the notion of Trump as president, especially if the choices are Sanders or Hillary. And while I've said before I really favor the Constitution Party, most people are saying, what? What party? There's no chance yet for a small party to win. A friend of mine just sent me a text, and he's reacting to Al Sharpton and refers to him as a race-baiting little twerp. And he is little now. He used to be. It's funny because when I had lunch with him, he was the big fat guy and I was the skinny guy, and now it's the other way around. 9:25, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 27. When was the last time you asked a friend for medical advice? Well, my friends at Tripp Family Medicine are going to be live with me each Wednesday morning during Top Story. We had Dr. Tripp in studio yesterday, and he was talking with us about the upcoming, in relation to St. Valentine's Day. Most of you are aware that if you're married, you might, or you have a significant other, you shouldn't forget that day. But he talked a little bit about the science of all of this and how this works with various people. Great conversation we had yesterday with the doctor. You can tune in each Wednesday at 8:30 for Better Health, brought to you by Tripp Family Medicine in Twin Falls, and they're located across from the main post office on Fillmore Street. Remember, life's too short not to feel good. Also, can I mention this quickly as well? We're going to have a special presentation with the doctor tomorrow morning, because 20 states now have said that they have encountered the Zika virus. and it's spreading fast like wildfire across North America. It came from Africa through Asia, hopscotched into South America, and is now quickly moving north. He's going to talk with us tomorrow morning. You might want to hear this about what you need to know. I think it would be important for anyone who might be a pregnant woman to tune in and listen to that, because you're getting conflicting advice from all different directions. Dr. Tripp scheduled to join us tomorrow morning at 8:30 right here on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Talking a little bit about what's happening in politically and coming out of New Hampshire the other day. Howard Kurtz, who's a political analyst, a media analyst really for Fox News. Speaking of people I know, Kurtz interviewed me about the state of television news for a story he wrote way back in early 2001. And I remember getting a lot of flack from that from various people in the TV industry, because you're not supposed to pull the curtain back and show people what really is going on. He was speaking with Megyn Kelly on the Fox News channel, and he's explaining people in this country, we've already seen plenty of evidence, they're not pleased, and things aren't going to be getting better.
Howie, there was a lot of media coverage in the past, days and weeks about controversial items involving Donald Trump. Just yesterday, he used the P word. He was repeating.
I didn't know we had that.
He was repeating, for those of you not following, it's another word for cat. And not long ago, he said that we should ban all Muslims coming into the United States who are not American. Here today in New Hampshire, when asked about that proposed ban on Muslims, 64% of the voters said they support it. They support the ban, and something like 60% of the voters say they like Trump because he tells it like it is.
Which shows you how far Donald Trump has moved this entire debate. And let's take a step back. This is a billionaire who was mocked and minimized for months, who was dismissed as a sideshow, whose imminent demise was predicted again and again and again. And now he has won this resounding victory in the first primary. Yes, he has more independents in this state that won't be available to him in the closed GOP primary states, but it turns out that he was more astute in channeling the public anger and frustration than most members of the political and the media establishment. And on the bad language, I would say a clear plurality of voters in the GOP primary here in New Hampshire have just given the middle finger to the GOP establishment.
Yeah, and the Democrats are really doing the same, too. Another writer I happened to read writing about the whole situation said, I think his name is Daniel Henninger, he writes for the Wall Street Journal, said, look, I mean, this is just a repudiation altogether, because 70% of Democrats who were surveyed voting in New Hampshire said they were upset with the direction of the country. That means with their guy in the White House. 928, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. This guy, Howard Kurtz, goes on to say, Trump pulled off the huge win, but if you're looking at most American media, they're telling you that the winner was John Kasich, who, by the way, spent just about every dollar he had left in his campaign war chest in New Hampshire, spent all of his time there. He's barely been to South Carolina. Come South Carolina in a couple of weeks, you're not going to hear John Kasich's name anymore. Yet why is the media promoting him? Well, a week before, the media was saying, hey, Marco Rubio finished third in Iowa. He's the winner. Because we don't like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. So we want you to vote for Marco Rubio. Kasich comes in second in New Hampshire, which was not at all unexpected. Oh, John Kasich, he's the nicest Republican since John Huntsman. Why, he's almost a liberal. We liberals think you should vote for a liberal. Don't vote for Trump. Don't end up voting for Cruz. No. And what happened to Rubio? Well, Rubio got bounced by the media because it said he repeats himself. A writer by the name of David Hersani says today, he said, yeah, but who doesn't in politics? Yet the media wants to create a narrative, and the media wants you to believe, he's writing at the Federalist, if you'd like to look that up. The media wants you to believe, well, this narrative is, this Rubio guy, he just keeps repeating himself over and over and over again, just like they used to tell you Dan Quayle was dumb, that Ronald Reagan was addle-brained, that George H.W. Bush was out of touch, that Mitt Romney was just a greedy old Wall Street guy who had no feelings whatsoever for the 47% out there. Yeah, in other words, Marco Rubio is a serious threat to Democrats, so we have to get him out of the way, and we just found the way to do that. Thanks, by the way, to Chris Christie, who was photographed giving Hillary Clinton a hug last week. Heck, he's hugged Obama, he's hugged Hillary. I don't know what is coming next with that guy. But he destroyed Rubio, and the media was like, hey, thank you, Chris. Thank you. We owe you one. Hey. 9:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. We've got more coming up in just a few minutes. In fact, more of your telephone calls as well. I have been so pleased that so many people have been standing by this show, because it does tend to get sometimes a wee bit controversial. But I think that their loyalty also suggests they're getting some success out of this as well. And among those people standing by this show, Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology. She's at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert, 1218 9th Street, unit number 2. Telephone 208-312-0957. Or you can go to MountHarrisonAudiology.com, because if you need your hearing checked, she's the person to go to. Diabetes and hearing loss are linked. If you or a loved one struggles with diabetes control, it could also be affecting your hearing. The inner ear is incredibly sensitive to changes in your blood supply. High blood sugars can cause hearing changes. Be sure to have your hearing screened today. 9:35. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Here's another non-starter for liberals in this year's election. In fact, I saw a couple of posts in just the last couple of days about this, about firearms, and liberals screaming about gun control, although lately not quite as much as they were just a month ago. Bill Maher, I keep hearing his name, Bill Maher, the comedian, or the comedian Bill Maher. I don't know that he's that funny. He has a show over at HBO, yet he has been really talking about poking fingers in the eyes of his fellow liberals. Number one, when we heard in that last segment from Megyn Kelly's program, 64% of voters in New Hampshire said Donald Trump is right when it comes to Muslim immigration. The elites in this country are saying, "Oh no, but that would be mean-spirited, and we have to destroy our country to make ourselves feel better, and we'll all feel better too, and we're a bad country, and it'll be good for us to finally get our comeuppance." Well, most Americans are saying no. And the elites say, well, no, wait a minute. Even, Jeb Bush, wait a minute. Jeb's mommy's going to be campaigning for him, slapping down Trump in the next few days. There's a great cartoon. Shows her walking around carrying a purse that's like a prune juice container, and little Jeb holding her hand, walking in his shorts and his sneakers, and she's saying, "Now where is that Mr. Trump man who's been saying all those bad things about you?" That's so 1980s. But I'm telling you right now that a lot of these issues that the libs are bringing up this year are non-starters. And when Bill Maher admitted in a column yesterday that he's a gun owner, and he also points out a great many Hollywood types also own firearms for self-defense. Well, folks, you're not going to be winning a lot of votes, even in your own party, if you go around saying, "Sorry, we're going to make you give those up." This is from a writer at the very conservative Washington Times, Why Gun Control is a Loser for Democrats. Tom Gresham is his name. There is nothing so comforting as a closely held prejudice, even when it repeatedly harms you. The white-hot passion of Democrats to restrict and even strip Americans of their constitutionally guaranteed right to buy, own, keep, shoot, and carry firearms continues as a monument to self-abuse. Simply put, the gun control issue is a loser. Why? Because most people know that if someone is kicking your door down at 2 a.m., you can call 911, but by the time the police get there, all they're going to be doing is mopping up your blood. So, if you can handle a firearm, you can take care of that situation first, and then the police can drag away the flotsam that was trying to attack you or rob you. We have a caller with us. You're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're on the air.
Okay, hi. About your Donald Trump and the immigration of the Muslims, I actually seen an interview with Louis Farrakhan online, and he actually supported the temporary ban on Muslims coming into this country until they can vet them better.
Really?
If Louis Farrakhan even agrees with Donald Trump, and he's, what is he, one of the chief speakers for the Muslim religion in the United States.
Well, the Nation of Islam is sort of a hybrid between Christianity and Islam. It's not really like the Islam out of the Middle East.
Oh, okay. I just found that so interesting that even he agreed with Donald Trump on that case.
Yeah, I'm a little amazed at that too. I Although I don't know that he'll be dining at the White House if Trump is elected.
Probably not.
All right. Hey, thank you much for the call, sir. Louis Farrakhan. He came to a university that I used to work in television. He came to one of the local universities where I was working, and he was doing a presentation, and he did a news conference with all the local media and claimed that he was not anti-Semitic, and that he'd never actually said anything anti-Semitic, and forgot who it was. There was somebody at the news conference who happened to be Jewish, who then whipped out a speech that Farrakhan had done just a few months earlier, where he was like, "I'm telling you, Jews, hello, Jews, I know what you Jews are up to, and we're going to get you, Jews." And Farrakhan just sat there dumbfounded that someone actually had done a little research and could prove him wrong. But, if he's a little worried about it too, yeah, then I guess, and when Bill Maher is worried about it, holy cow, folks, maybe Lefty out there is finally going to be getting his comeuppance himself when we get to Election Day. 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Speaking of people coming here, if fences don't work, there's the old joke from Charles Krauthammer, then why is there one around the White House? Because Trump says he's going to build that. He mentioned it again on Tuesday night. He's going to build that wall along the Mexican border. Well, speaking of wall builders, I'm going to share with you one of our allies is doing something similar, and it's working.